My name is Joanne, and I am 62 years old, and the morning after my husband died, his two grown children stood on my front porch with a locksmith and a yellow moving truck. Whitney would not look at me. Brett held up his phone like a small shield and told me I had 90 minutes to gather what he called personal items only. He said the house was Dad's, not mine. I nodded. I went inside. I packed slowly, the way you pack when you already know something the other person does not. I met Robert in 2007 at a grief support group in the basement of a Lutheran church off Route 9. He had lost his wife to ovarian cancer. I had lost my first husband, Daniel, to a heart attack in our kitchen on a Sunday morning with the coffee still brewing. Robert sat across from me in a folding chair and did not say a single word for the first 3 weeks. The 4th week, he asked me if I wanted a ride home because it was raining. That was the whole beginning of it. A ride home in the rain. We married in 2009 in a small county courthouse with 2 witnesses and a judge who kept calling me ma'am. Robert had 2 adult children from his first marriage. Brett was 34 then, an accountant with a tight jaw. Whitney was 31, a stay-at-home mother with 3 children and a sharp little laugh she used like a knife. They did not come to the wedding. Whitney sent a card that said congratulations on the new chapter. I kept that card in my dresser drawer for years. I do not know why. For a long time, I tried. I really did try. I sent birthday cards. I drove 40 miles for Whitney's children's recitals and clapped until my hands hurt. I brought casseroles to Brett's house when his wife had the flu. None of it changed anything. Whitney would call me Joanne the way other people say excuse me. Brett would ask his father questions about money in front of me as though I were a houseplant in the corner. Robert noticed. He did not say much about it. He just squeezed my hand under the table. I was a dental hygienist for 31 years. I cleaned teeth. I told people to floss. I listened to strangers cry about their marriages with my hands inside their mouths. I retired at 59 because Robert had started to shake. Just a little at first. He would set down his coffee cup and the saucer would rattle, and he would look at me with this small, surprised face, like he had been caught doing something wrong. We went to a neurologist in March of 2015. Parkinson's disease. The doctor said it like he was reading a weather report. 8 years. That is how long I cared for my husband. I want to say that simply because it was not simple at all. I learned how to lift a grown man from a recliner without hurting his back or mine. I learned which medications made him hallucinate spiders on the ceiling. I learned to cut his food into pieces small enough for a child. I learned to be ignored by his children, who would call once a month and ask if Dad was still hanging in there, the way you ask about a faulty appliance. In 2017, Robert asked me to drive him to his attorney's office. He did not tell me why. He just said, "Joanne, put on the blue sweater. I want you to come." I sat in the waiting room with a magazine I was not reading. He was in there for almost 2 hours. When he came out, he was quiet in the car. Then he said, "I fixed something today." I asked him what he had fixed. He said, "I made sure they cannot do to you what they are already planning to do." I did not understand him then. I changed the subject because his hands were shaking, and I wanted him to rest. That was the first hint of the weapon. I did not recognize it as a weapon. I thought it was just an errand. The last 11 weeks of Robert's life, I slept on a cot beside his hospital bed in our living room. We had moved the bed downstairs because he could not manage the stairs anymore. The hospice nurse came twice a week. Whitney came once. She stood in the doorway with her purse still on her shoulder and said the room smelled like medicine. Then she left. Brett came 3 times. Each time he asked his father about the brokerage account. Once he asked it while Robert was asleep, and he asked me instead, and I told him I did not know the balance. That was a lie. I knew it down to the penny. Robert had shown me. The night Robert died, the house was very quiet. I had been holding his hand for a long time. He had stopped speaking 2 days earlier, but that night, around 3 a.m, he opened his eyes and looked at me. He said, "Tulips." Just that one word, tulips. I told him, "Yes, I know, in the fall, I promise." He closed his eyes again. He died a little before sunrise. I sat on the cot for almost an hour before I called anyone. I just wanted one more hour where it was still our house and he was still in it. I called Brett at 7. I called Whitney at 7:05. Whitney said, "Well, we knew this was coming." Brett said he would handle the arrangements. I said, "Thank you," because I did not have the strength to say anything else. I went into the kitchen and made coffee out of habit. I poured 2 cups before I remembered. I sat at the table and drank one of them while the other one went cold across from me. They came the next morning at 8:30. I heard the truck first, a diesel engine idling in my driveway, then the doorbell again, before I could even reach the door. Brett was standing on the porch in a navy windbreaker. Whitney was behind him in sunglasses, even though it was overcast. A man in coveralls was carrying a toolbox. Brett said, "Joanne, we need to talk." I opened the door because I did not know what else to do. He stepped inside without being invited. Whitney followed. The locksmith waited on the porch. Brett told me the house was his father's, not mine. He said that with his hand on the back of my own kitchen chair. Whitney said they had spoken to a lawyer. She said they were being generous by giving me 90 minutes. Brett said personal items only. He said no furniture, no art, no anything from the office. He said the Lexus stays. He said the brokerage account is not your concern. He said it the way you might explain a rule to a slow child. I did not argue. I did not cry in front of them. I did not say the word prenup. I just asked if I could have a box. Whitney said there were boxes in the truck. Brett said I should hurry. I went upstairs. I packed slowly. I folded each of my sweaters the way I always folded them. I took the card Whitney had sent me in 2009, the one that said congratulations on the new chapter. I do not know why I took it. I took Robert's reading glasses off the nightstand. I took the small wooden box where he kept his wedding ring from his first marriage, because I knew Whitney would throw it away. I took my own clothes, my own shoes, my mother's pearl earrings, and a photograph of Robert on a fishing boat in 2011, before any of this started. I did not take the prenup. The prenup was in a fireproof box in the attorney's office, with a copy at the bank. I did not need to take it. It was already where it needed to be. When I came downstairs with my 2 suitcases and 1 cardboard box, Whitney was sitting at my kitchen table eating an apple from my refrigerator. Brett was on the phone in the living room, telling someone the house would be ready by the weekend. The locksmith was already taking the front door handle apart. I walked past all of them. I put my things in my car, which they had not yet thought to take. I drove to a Holiday Inn on the highway and got a room on the 2nd floor. That night, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in my coat. I had not taken my coat off. I called the attorney, James Mercer, who had been Robert's lawyer for 37 years. I told him what had happened. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Joanne, do you remember what Robert fixed in 2017? I said yes. He said, "Good." He said, "Go to sleep. I will see you in the morning." I did not sleep. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the parking lot until the sky turned gray. James met me at his office at 9. He had a thick folder on his desk, tabbed and labeled in Robert's careful handwriting. The prenup Robert had rewritten in 2017 granted me lifetime tenancy of the house, not ownership, tenancy. Brett and Whitney would inherit the title eventually, but only after I no longer lived there. Until then, the house was mine to occupy. They could not sell it. They could not enter it without my permission. They could not change the locks. The agreement also gave me the Lexus outright and 1/4 of the brokerage account, which Robert had moved into a separate trust with my name on it 3 years earlier. The document was witnessed by James himself and by Robert's longtime physician, who had signed a separate letter attesting to his soundness of mind. I sat in James's office and looked at Robert's signature on the last page. He had signed it the same way he signed everything, Robert L. Hallberg. The L was for Lewis, his mother's maiden name. I touched the paper with 2 fingers. I did not cry until I was back in my car. The court order took 12 days. James filed it that same afternoon. The judge signed it without a hearing. The sheriff drove me to my own house on a Tuesday morning, just before noon. Brett's truck was in the driveway. Whitney's car was parked on the lawn. The sheriff knocked. Brett opened the door. The sheriff handed him the order and asked him to step outside. Whitney came out behind him, still holding a coffee mug. My coffee mug, the blue one with the chip on the handle. Whitney looked at me over the top of her sunglasses and said, "This is not over." The sheriff said, "Ma'am, it is." He handed me a new key. The locksmith had already been called. He was in his van across the street, waiting. Brett did not speak to me. He walked past me to his truck. He dropped his keys on the gravel and bent to pick them up, and his hand was shaking the way Robert's used to shake. I noticed that. I did not say anything about it. Whitney left the coffee mug on the porch railing, the blue one, with the chip. I went inside my house. The locksmith changed the locks while I stood in the living room. The hospital bed was gone. They had taken it somewhere. The cot was gone too. The room felt very large and very empty. I sat on the couch in my coat, the same coat I had been wearing for almost 2 weeks, and I looked at the spot on the carpet where the bed had been. There were 4 small dents in the rug where the wheels had pressed down for 11 weeks. I looked at those dents for a long time. Brett and Whitney communicate with me only through their attorney now. They send letters about the brokerage account, about taxes, about what they call equitable distribution. James handles all of it. I have not spoken to either of them since the Tuesday on the porch. Whitney's children sent me a Christmas card last year, signed by their mother in Whitney's handwriting. I did not open it for 3 weeks. When I did, it said, "Thinking of you during this difficult time." I put it in the dresser drawer with the other card, the one from 2009. Congratulations on the new chapter. In October, I planted tulips along the front walk, 120 bulbs, red and white and yellow. I knelt on a foam pad because my knees are not what they used to be, and I dug each hole with a small metal trowel Robert had bought me for our 5th anniversary. He had wrapped it in newspaper because he said it did not deserve real wrapping paper. I had laughed at him. He had laughed too. The tulips came up in April. They were beautiful for about 3 weeks. Then they were gone. That is how tulips are. You wait all winter for them, and then they leave you almost immediately. I cut a few and put them in a vase on the kitchen table. I poured 2 cups of coffee that morning, the way I sometimes still do, by accident. I drank one. The other one went cold across from me. I did not pour it out. I just sat there with it. The house was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a car door closed. I thought for 1 second that it might be him. Then I remembered. Then I made myself remember again, the way you have to, over and over, for a long time. I am still in the house. I will be in the house until I am not. The tulips will come back next April. Robert always wanted tulips. I am keeping my promise. That is all I am doing. I am just keeping a small promise to a quiet man who once gave me a ride home in the rain.